9 of UX Design. All right, last week you guys did really well on our first discussion, scoofomorphism, going over the sort of rise and fall of scoofomorphism as it sort of pertains to interactive design, interactive systems, web design in general. Everybody participated really well, really thoughtful, engaging discussion posts, and good responses to your classmates. So overall, everybody did a really good job responding to the discussion prompt, as well as doing your research and the associated reading. So nice job. All right, so this week, in week 9, we got a couple of things. Number one, we have part 2 of our scoofomorphism discussion, but this time it's going to be a hands-on sort of drawing discussion, as it were. We're going to be sharing some thumbnail sketches with each other and giving some feedback on those, but we'll get into that in a second. We are also going to introduce Project 2. You guys finished up Project 1 last week, which came out fabulous. Everybody did a really good job. Nice teamwork. Now, on this second project, it is going to be an individualized project. You're going to be working on your own on this one, so we're going to introduce that next. So we'll get into that in a second. All right, so reading for this week. The consumable for this week is this article here, How to Design Icons, Tutorials, and Pro Tips. This article right here. It's a great article. Gets into a lot of really good sort of ideas and best practices for designing icons in terms of how to structure it, how to use grids, how to use geometry as the basis for your iconography in a way that is consistent and uniform and helps to create instantly recognizable icons. What I love about this article too is there's some great sort of animations that help sort of break down how to use the grid and to create nice balanced icon designs in a way that is sort of universal looking, eye-catching, and yet unique at the same time. Adobe Illustrator is the sort of design tool of choice for this, but you could also use Adobe XD and even potentially Adobe InDesign. I would probably recommend Illustrator, but ultimately it's up to you. Anyway, we're going to read through this in advance of doing this next part of the discussion because we are going to be creating some icons, at least from a sketch point of view, but this will totally be helpful in terms of getting your sketches done. All right, so part 2 of our scoofomorphism discussion, icon creation. So, of course, last time around, you guys responded to the prompt with regard to how useful or timely or appropriate scoofomorphism as a design system, as a design philosophy. So today we are going to focus specifically on icons. Icons, of course, are symbols that represent objects and their functions. So unlike other sorts of symbols, these are meant to represent what it does, meaning that if you click on it in an interactive system, it is going to do something, and the icon itself is meant to represent what that function is. Now, of course, in web design and mobile design, software development in general, we see icons being used, all the time. The use of an icon can substitute for the written name of the object and its functions. They are often frozen in time, which is interesting, in that what they represent can be more of an idealistic or an archetype of something, whereas the functionality of it is sort of timeless. So meaning that you might have an icon for the pen tool in Illustrator, and it is representational of an old metal tip dip pen that you would dip into a jar of ink, which I'm pretty sure none of us do anymore, unless maybe you take calligraphy classes on the side. But regardless, it is frozen in time. It doesn't represent what modern pens look like at all, and yet it is representational of the pen tool. And so icons have an interesting status in that they represent a function. They are sometimes frozen in time. And of course, these days at least, they are commonly used in an interactive environment. So anyway, outside of that reading, for this discussion, you're going to choose a tool from your kitchen now, or your parents' kitchen. It can be either a countertop tool or a handheld tool, any sort of kitchen tool that you would commonly find in a kitchen. So any of these, for example, would work great. Whether you're familiar with them or not, you've at least maybe seen some of them. Maybe you like to cook and you've had some hands-on experience with them, or maybe you're just familiar with them by sight. And like I said, it can be either a countertop tool like any of these, something like a toaster or a water boiler or a blender or an espresso machine or something like that. Or it can be a handheld tool like any number of these. Utensils are applicable, right? Whether it's a fork, a spoon, a knife, soup spoon, a ladle, anything like that. But of course, even some more complex hand tools, such as a potato masher or an onion slicer or a corkscrew or a colander, or if you're Italian, you'd call it a scolabasta or something like that. Any of these many hand tools. So you're going to choose any one that you like, whether you have experience with it or maybe you just like the shape of it. And then from that choice, you are going to make 20 thumbnail sketches of it on paper in order to get used to its shape and form. Now, ideally, I would like you to do this actually on paper. That would be great. Either on graph paper or dot paper, that same graph or dot paper that we used for our initial rough sketches, and paper wireframes for our first project. And your goal is to simplify the tool into its basic understandable shapes. So think basic geometric shapes. Break it down into whatever those shapes are. That article that you are going to read will help you out with that quite a bit. But deconstruction of objects into simple geometric shapes such as circles and triangles and squares and rectangles makes it a lot easier to understand. Now, of course, thumbnail sketches I'm sure you are familiar with, but they are small, rough sketches that are named as such as they are meant to be fairly small, maybe the size of your thumbnail, maybe a little bigger, where you get the ideas from your head onto paper as quickly as possible. So whatever concepts or versions of your kitchen tool are floating around in your noggin, you're going to want to get onto paper as quickly as possible. And you're going to do 20 of them. So 5 across, 4 down, 4 across, 5 down, however you want to grid them out onto your sheet of graph paper. Ideally, you want to do all 20 on one sheet of your graph or dot paper. That would be good. Generally, try to work quickly, but not so quickly that you're not putting any thought into it. But don't take so much time to think about it that you are stymieing your thought process. You want to have the thoughts flow as freely as possible. So once you get that done, once you're happy with your thumbnail sketches, and if you feel that 20 is not doing it for you and you want to do another set of 20, feel free. I am not stopping you from doing as many thumbnails as you want. The idea is to wring out as many ideas as you can. Don't judge those ideas, whether they're good, bad, whether they're decipherable, whether you can't understand what they look like, or whether they're beautifully drawn. It does not matter. Thumbnails are meant to just get the ideas out. They are roughs. They are the roughest of roughs, as it were. So once you're happy with your thumbnail sketches and you're fairly comfortable drawing your kitchen tool of choice, choose one of the thumbnails that you feel works best, and then you're going to shift over to Adobe Illustrator. And you're going to use 2 separate artboards, both size 10 inches by 10 inches, two square artboards, and give yourself a 1-inch margin all the way around. And in doing so, it's going to give you 2 places to turn your thumbnail into 2 finished icon designs. Be sure to use a grid. Set your 1-inch grid using the grid feature in Illustrator. And of course, your goal here is to create 2 separate vector representations of your kitchen tool, 1 per artboard. You are going to make one of your icons in a scoofomorphic style, meaning that you're going to try to make it as realistic looking as possible, right? Now, to be fair, I am not expecting anybody to have Rembrandtian style drawing skills here, but through the use of shadow or gradients or thick and thin line applications, you are going to try to represent a kitchen icon as realistically as you can from an icon perspective, right? And then on the second artboard, you are going to represent the second icon of the same kitchen tool in a flat style, in a flat, simplistic style. Perhaps taking advantage of negative space, perhaps using unfinished lines, maybe a single color. Keep it as simple as possible. In both cases, the goal is to make it recognizable as quickly as possible. They should be universally, instantly recognizable so that when somebody sees them, they say, oh, that's a fork, or that's a ladle, or that's a toaster, or whatever it is that you chose to do. So recognizability is key, which is why we're spending time doing 20 or more thumbnails, because you want to make sure that you really have a good handle on how it looks and that it's recognizable. If you are unsure of it, be sure to show your sketches to somebody else, maybe somebody in your family, your roommate, a friend, and just say, hey, what do you think those are? And if they can recognize them right away, then you are on the right track. Once you are done with your Illustrator file, you're going to post and attach both your thumbnail sketches. Just take a photo of your thumbnail sketches with your phone, as well as your Adobe Illustrator file. You're going to post both of them here in the discussion board. And in doing so, we will all be able to look at them, and we will give some feedback on them. We'll take a look at them when we return, but you have until the end of this week to get this done. They are not due until the end of the week, until Friday at 10 p.m. So you have all week to work on these, okay? So take your time with them. Set aside some time to work on the sketches, then maybe get away from them for a little while, and then come back and work on the Illustrator part of it, okay? All right, so hopefully that is fairly clear. All right, next we are going to introduce Project 2. So Project 2, over here under Assignments, right? So if you go to Assignments and then go down here to Project 2, you'll see that we are going to be making an instructional website. And the first project we worked on, Project 1, our tablet application design for our chosen restaurant, was a 4-part project, 3 parts plus your final presentation. And then for this project, it is going to be 5 parts, 4 parts plus your final presentation. So take a look at the due dates, make sure you record those, put them in your calendar. I know they will show up in your Canvas calendar automatically, but just take note of them, make sure you're sure when things are happening. So part 1, which is we're going to start working on now, is not due this Friday, but it is due the following Friday on the 29th by 9 p.m. So anyway, we're going to start with part 1, and you can check out the due dates for all the rest of the parts. This project will traverse the rest of the semester. So we're going to be working on this in pieces. We're going to have lots of check-ins, a bunch of stand-ups, some critiques, drafts, etc., etc. All right, so let's start with part 1. So once we get into part 1 here, obviously the basic directions are here in Canvas as usual. The overview is right here, as well as specifically what we're going to be doing for part 1 and some notes for the overall project. You can download the entire handout here, which we're going to jump over to right here. All right, so this is an instructional website you're going to be making. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to be tapping into do-it-yourself culture. Learning how things work, and of course DIY culture, is very common today. Whether you are rejecting consumerism, are naturally autodidactic, or just like making and doing stuff, there are endless guides and articles on the web that can help you achieve certain levels of self-sufficiency. Maybe you take advantage of some of these. Maybe you go over to YouTube to learn how to do things for the first time, or to remind you about how to do something that you do on a fairly regular basis. Maybe you're doing something around your house. Maybe you're working on your car. Maybe you're changing your oil, how to change a tire if you get a flat, how to refinish furniture, how to cook a meal of some kind. There are lots of resources out there, more so today than ever before, where people can learn how to do things, follow directions, whether you're following a video or a nicely designed website. Those resources are out there. So we are going to make our own resource. And you specifically are going to create an instructional website that will teach a newcomer, somebody who's never done this before, how to do something that you consider yourself an expert in, or at least really proficient in. And I know sometimes when students hear this and they say, I'm not an expert at anything. Well, first of all, that's not true. You're good at a lot of things. I'll guarantee you there are some things you are good at. The question is, what is it would you like to teach us? This can come from a wide variety of sources and can be pretty much anything. The only rules about this is whatever it is you choose to teach us, you have to be able to write a minimum of 10 steps as to what it is you are trying to teach, and it can't be anything super simple. So don't try to teach us how to make ice or something like that. We know how to do that. That's pretty simple. Well, I'm pretty good at it. I mess it up occasionally. But aside from that, it's got to be something that you can write a minimum of 10 steps about. So the first part we are going to be attacking in this project is the concept of web writing, or writing for the web. And so content for the web, of course, comes in a variety of shapes and sizes. We've talked about a lot of this already. But the writing part of it is often overlooked. And sometimes people think writing is writing is writing is writing, and that's not exactly true. The way you would write a news article is different than the way you would write a blog, for example. Web writing for instructional purposes is different than, say, writing for technical purposes. Opinion writing, reviews of movies or albums or concerts, all different styles of writing. And so writing for the web in a way that is clear and descriptive and that is supportive of the visuals that come along with the website is a very specific sort of technique. Next week, when we get back in person, we're going to be looking at some examples of good web writing. We're going to be talking about sort of some tips and tricks for good web writing, and we're going to be taking a look at some people who are known web writers and what exactly that looks like out in the real world. What is a UX writer exactly? We'll be dealing with that when we get back. But in the meantime, you are going to start this project with part 1. So, part 1, research, writing, and planning, and you're going to get started on this week. So the first part, of course, is decide what you would like to teach somebody. Think about what you enjoy doing, what are your hobbies and interests, what do you feel that you're good at. And again, I promise you, you are good at something. You might be good at a lot of different things. It's just a matter of what would you like to teach us. Over the years, I've given variations of this project over the past few years and have gotten all sorts of cool things. I had a student once teach us how to make an omelet in a pot of boiling water using only a Ziploc bag. It's pretty interesting. So anything you can think of. If you're not sure, maybe converse with your friends and family, and they might have some ideas for you. Once you've decided what you are going to write, you're going to sit down this week and write at least 10 clear descriptive steps that will help guide somebody through the task to successful completion. Now, this is just going to be a first draft, and you want to have your first draft done in time for next class, right? In time for our next Monday meeting, you want to have this first draft done. Show a draft of those steps to at least 3 people before we meet next. 3 people, could be a couple of roommates, a couple of friends. You can email them to some family to take a look at and test to see if they can follow along with your instructions just by reading them, without the aid of any photographs or graphics or schematics or anything. Just can they follow the steps simply by reading them? What we're trying to do is be able to write short descriptive steps that get the point across in a way that tells a very clear narrative, leads from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 and so on and so forth, and that allows the reader to visualize what it is you would like them to do, even if it's something that they've maybe never done before. And that's a difficult task. So this is why we're spending this whole week just on the draft of this. So decide what you'd like us to learn. Write your first draft of your steps. Run it by at least 3 people and get some of their feedback. Obviously, take their questions and concerns into account, and then maybe do some rewriting of your draft. So I guess technically we'll be looking at your second draft when we get back. And then you'll be stopping there, at least in terms of the writing, right? Now, the other thing you could be doing this week for part 1 is you could start creating and or collecting any imagery, which could be photos, illustrations, diagrams, graphics, whatever, that you think you will need to enhance the experience and make the teaching of your topic more clear and more enjoyable. Now, for example, let's say you want to teach us how to make like your grandmother's famous pasta recipe or something like that. This might be a good opportunity this week to, if you have the opportunity to go home or to get into a kitchen, to actually make the recipe and shoot some photos along the way as you're going. Try to take some nice, clear, well-composed photographs, and then you'll have those ready to go. But that being said, you could also use illustrations or diagrams or other types of graphics that you could create yourself. And if you think it will be helpful, you could also use stock imagery from places like Unsplash, Pexels, or Adobe Stock. But of course, in curating photos from those places, obviously make sure that they all look like they go together, that they work well together, and more importantly, that they'll be supportive of your written steps. Now, this doesn't have to be your final collection of imagery. We'll be sort of taking a look at that also when we get back next Monday to see what you might have for some options, but at least get started on doing some research and collecting them. All right, so that is the goal for this week with regard to Project 2. Decide what you want to teach us. do a draft of your 10 steps, show them to 3 people, get some feedback, make a few updates to turn it into a second draft, and then get out there and start collecting and or creating some imagery that you think will be helpful. When we get back on Monday, on the 25th, we will take a look at all of your drafts. We will discuss them. We'll all have the opportunity to read through them, and you can show us your collection of imagery, and we can talk about what your plan is for what it is you would like to teach us. We will then, of course, get into the construction of the site, what that's going to be all about, and all of the details. Now, of course, you can certainly read ahead and take a look at part 2, which we'll be doing the following week, starting when we get back. We'll be doing our site diagram, wireframes, and doing some usability testing. And since we did do these steps already for Project 1, you are more familiar with them now, so you can start planning ahead for that. Then, of course, part 3, we'll be getting into the visual design of the site. We're going to be creating our prototype in Adobe XD. And new to this project, aside from just creating a visual prototype, we are going to be diving into Adobe XD's interactive functionality for prototyping. We're going to be learning how to make links, how to make pages scroll, how to create photo galleries, etc., etc. So we're going to get into all the interactive functionality as well, and then we'll be doing further usability testing, etc., etc. So you'll be able to go from there. Pay attention to the notes for the sites. Now, this is a little further ahead, but be sure to check it out so you can see where we're at, and of course, what the site size is going to be. And we'll get into more of that when we get back. But for now, just focus on part 1. Okay, so again for this week, Scoofomorphism Part 2, icon creation, beginning Project 2, and of course pay attention to the due dates. I will see you all back in person on the 25th to go over all of that wonderful stuff you're going to create. If between now and then you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, or anything, be sure to email me. I am always happy to get back to you almost immediately and can help out. So hope you have a good time working on this stuff. I will see you in about a week. Thank you so much. Have a great day.